This program will contain full spoilers for the film Hereditary by Ari Aster. It's a good movie, but it's scary, so be warned.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pear Tree Peaches Film Podcast. I am your host, Christopher Birnbaum. I am here joined by Laura Birnbaum.
Hello.
Michael Birnbaum.
Hello.
And Sophie the dog, who is slobbering on a small stuffed squirrel, or rather, previously stuffed squirrel. Mm-hmm. Today we're going to be talking about Hereditary, a film by Ari Aster from 2018. We follow a small family in Utah, Annie and Steve and their children Peter and Charlie, as they grieve the death of the mother named Evelyn, who is Annie's mother. It is a family drama where instead of their grief bringing everybody closer together, it tears them apart and it ends up twisting into a horrific nightmare. Yeah. We're going to discuss that today. Go over our initial thoughts and then spiral into a regular old conversation that we have been having for many years on car rides home from the theater. But now to tape.
Part 1. Lenses.
So Laura, what were your initial thoughts on the film? Because you saw this, you were the only person out of us that saw this in theaters.
Yes. I am a big fan of Ari Aster, and this was obviously my first film that I saw of his. So, me being a big horror movie fan, I have to say that I really liked Hereditary. And so I walked out of the theater feeling really, I guess, shaken by it. But I just loved how Aster takes these tropes and just kind of flips them. And so, yeah, it's a really cool film, and I definitely recommend it to people who like dark things. And
Michael, what are your initial thoughts of the film?
I liked quite a bit of it. I liked the craftsmanship of it. I liked some of the themes and especially the obsessive artist angle with the miniature dollhouse and all that. And but I had a lot of problems with what I perceived as horror movie cliches the second half of the film. Mm-hmm. So a mixed review for me.
Yeah. And I really don't like most horror movies. I'm very I just don't like most of them, but the ones that I do like I love, and this is one of those that I love. I was not planning on seeing this until I heard that it had no jump scares.
Woohoo!
Woo!
Yay!
And at that point I decided that I would go in to watch it, and I was not disappointed. I really liked this movie. It really got under my skin. It really has stuck with me since I watched it in a very serious way. But it's still something that I really want to talk about and really want to delve deeply into with you guys. Mm-hmm. Oh, and we're going to go, like, all spoilers. Everything is spoiled, always, in this discussion. So there's sort of what I would perceive as, like, almost a satire of evangelism. Mm-hmm. And going over the scenes with Joan, because Joan's sort of the character that's the satire of evangelism. Mm-hmm. Looking at it again now, what do you guys notice about those sorts of things? And do you guys? I see it as a very strong theme of the movie, but do you guys disagree or agree with that sort of take?
So first of all, I saw this movie when it came out in 2018, and as with all horror movies that I see, I warned you, Chris, don't see this movie. You would hate it. Don't watch it. So when I got I believe it was a text from you and you said just watched Hereditary, and you said something else. But then, so I was shocked about that. But then when you followed it up with saying like, "Oh my gosh, this is like Evangelism the movie" or something like that.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what?
Did we watch the same
Did
movie?
we watch the same movie? What is he talking about?
Yeah.
But I was really just excited that you had seen it. So as we've talked about it since, I do definitely see there's a lot of Christian overtones that aren't Christian at all, but
Yeah.
it's supposed to be like
Well, like
mocked.
the mechanics
The mechanics of it.
by which people draw people
Exactly.
into Christianity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's like this charisma about it. I think that the guy who is at the funeral in the beginning, he has the
Spooky.
definite vibe there. So my answer to your question is that I didn't see it before. I see it now. It's not the lens through which I see the film, but I see what you see.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Dad?
Yeah, I thought that aspect of it, which was more clear as we just rewatched it, was one of my more favorite parts of it. The character of Joan, I thought, was really well done. I appreciated the subtlety of that. This was in basically still the first half of the movie where I think it worked a lot better. And the woman, don't know the actress's name, but she was so...
Toni Collette?
No, the Joan.
Joan. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Toni Collette was amazing
What
through
is
the whole
her
thing. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
But Joan was so good at
And
playing Ann Dowd.
I think.
Yeah, good job, Ann. She was so good at being that, like Christopher said, the evangelical, pulling you into the net kind of thing, and doing it in a way that was so subtle. We as audience members kind of buy it. You know, she seemed like she was really.
Yeah, we don't even notice it
It's
until
just somebody was trying to help her,
Yeah.
and
then you get the grief.
the grief counseling thing, and then bumping into each other accidentally in quotes
Yeah.
at the Michaels store or whatever it was. Oh yes, and no, she just found this thing, and the idea of accessing avenues to control or manipulate people through the doorway of their grief is something that we've all had some experiences with fundamentalism and evangelical behavior, some of it really well-meaning and some of it manipulative and of somewhat spurious intent. It was familiar. It was like a reference from real life that they pulled into the movie. It was very Rosemary's Baby, you know,
Yeah,
the friendly
that's like
neighbors.
very overt.
Yeah, that was and I think, you know, references to horror films that were really superb in the past is a familiar trope to use, but really highly effective in this case. Some of the stuff in the second half of the film, which was more gory, was tropes to films that I have less regard for.
Yeah.
So Laura, that's sort of like the main lens that I see this film through, even through the Pyman stuff. I sort of Pyman is just that religion that's using these mechanics.
Yeah.
But what was, when you first saw it and when you were thinking about it and when it shook you, what was sort of the lens that you were seeing? Beyond, or was it just the sort of like through line of horror film? Because you mentioned a breath of fresh air or something like that.
Yes. I think it's the latter for me. More so just through the lens of the history of horror and the history of, well, I guess just that, because I do consider this to be a horror film, but of course it is also a family drama. But just the fact that it is a family drama that is also horror makes it unique for me. So yeah, that's kind of how I was looking at it. I was just like sitting there excited about like how different this was.
Part 2. Referentiality.
But also, in retrospect, and I'm ashamed that I didn't quite pick up on all of this, just how referential it was, and just how cliche some of the things are. But in the moment, as I was sitting in the theater, it felt, something about it just felt so different and new.
What were some of the cliches that seemed familiar to you that you don't think worked?
Well, even though I'm one of the few who really likes the ending of the film, them chanting Hail Pyman at the end did seem a lot like Rosemary's Baby. It was like a little too much like it. You know how they...
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a little too on the nose.
A little too on the nose.
Yeah.
But in the end, I don't really care. Not too much.
When it comes to the referentiality, and this is something that I think that you and I see in his earlier work, which is that the referentiality is very overt, but he uses that to sort of subvert our expectations of those things. And this is less subversion of the genre, but more of like an expansion of it. And he's using those tropes in interesting and unique ways, even though it is overt referentiality. Like the Hail Pyman thing, like it is a birth, it is like a rebirth of a new evil being at the end of both movies, Rosemary's Baby and this one. But the way that it's delivered and the tone of those are pretty different.
I would say very different, yeah.
How would you contrast the two?
Well, Rosemary's Baby is the Antichrist, and then the dude's like screaming Hail Satan, but nobody is really acknowledging her. They just sort of like brush her off. They brush off her torment and her horror in the situation, and then they're just like, yeah, we're excited about this. And she's just like, ah. But in this one, like, it's very somber, and it's very serious. There's no, it's not like a celebration. It's like the ritual is happening. We're doing this in a very serious way. Even though the endings are similar in the regards of that the bad guys win.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I think one of the things that I liked Rosemary's Baby better about was in Hereditary, it's portentous and very serious and a little bit too self-important, and too I would say pompous in a way.
Because it comes off apocalyptic.
Yeah, it comes across like, okay, this is apocalyptic, and there's apocalyptic, and there's no no other notes in there. It's just this bleak. It's the end of the world, and everybody go home and just put a blanket over your head and never stop crying. In Rosemary's Baby, what happens at the very end is that they're counting on Rosemary's maternal instincts to kick in to raise this baby.
Yeah.
And the brilliant moment in that, which there was none of in this ending, was she hears the baby crying, and she can't resist going over to the crib and pick up that baby, no matter what it looks like. And it was there was a little bit of humor to that. It was like, well, at least the kid's got a mom. You know, it had a little bit of like sort of brilliance to that. That was brilliant, having her go over and pick up that baby.
From the box to the microwave.
I like hot. I'm thinking of things that I like about it, so that they're not so one-sided. I like the leitmotif of the obsessed artist.
I spilled
That
my
worked for me.
water. Can you give me a paper towel? Here it is. It's closest to me. Oh my goodness, here we go.
Part 3. Dad's Beef.
It's up to you.
Well, let's try and reframe that then. Of sort of how you sort of look at the movie is more in the context of where you are in your life now, having previously been a big fan of horror.
Yeah.
And you're sort of looking at this as like, if Ari Aster was your film student,
Yeah.
and he's bringing you this movie, and you're grading him on it.
I would be more gentle with him than I'm being right now. So if I wanted to reframe that, I would say, look, Ari, I've spent my life creating and viewing art. I used to love the darker the better, the more disturbing the better. But there's a point where you have to have a little bit of contrast to this, so it's not just relenting sadism and the theater of the cruelty, reveling in the suffering of the innocents. Okay, come on, Ari. Don't be stuck in that one mode. There's more notes to hit than that.
Mm-hmm.
Make it more interesting. It's he's tremendously gifted technically in the craftsmanship and so many of the subtle tension as it builds from the beginning, especially with Annie doing the miniature houses and the theme of the artist being obsessed and working through her grief and all that stuff. That's what worked. But all that other kind of stuff, I'm talking to a young student from the point of view of an older artist. I would say, don't take yourself so seriously. Don't be so just hammering. It's like a heavy metal band hammering on a D chord. It's like if you don't have a bridge to go to, it's boring. So it's kind of like,
and that's what you ended up liking more about Midsummer.
I was just gonna say.
Yeah. Midsummer had more notes to it, and I think the performance of the young actress that was in that had a lot of nuance to it.
Florence Pugh,
and I think that was a better film because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, do you have something to respond? Or that
I was
you were
actually gonna
the
say,
same thing.
Midsummer, yeah.
Part 4. Production Design.
Talking about the miniatures. Let's talk about the production design of this film, because I think that's one of the real shining stars.
Yeah.
Yes.
In this is the amount of research into occult that Ari Aster did, into the Paimon demon and Paimon cults.
Are there Paimon cults?
We can hope that nobody would be that stupid. You have had a stronger reaction as we've been discussing this movie today and rewatching some parts of thinking about Annie's processing her grief through the artwork that she makes in the context of your own artwork and as a device in the film.
Right, and my history as an artist was very much studying, German expressionism and art that was processing political and social events in Germany and during the war and post-war through really dark, disturbing films. And set design was a big part of what I loved about it. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or the paintings of Edvard Munch. Things like that. I was just fascinated by how artists could process these powerful, dark emotions through their pieces. And I think the opening shot of this movie is one of the best shots in the movie, as the camera pans from a window to the interior of the dollhouse, and the camera goes into the dollhouse, and it's like a fantastic idea to have that the interior of the dollhouse become alive. And I think that tells the whole theme of the movie in terms of one of the themes that I think is one of the most effective themes is art as an avenue to deal with the unthinkable and the unspeakable, the literally unspeakable. And Toni Collette deserves tremendous credit for how deep she went with her performance in that. Yeah. And
Oscar snubbed.
They just couldn't handle it. But also, just the dynamic in the family. I mean, there's nothing really more terrifying than asking yourself, am I going to repeat the mistakes of my parents? Or, the speech she makes at her mother's funeral. I saw her as an artist through the whole thing, trying to make sense of this bizarre way she grew up in this,
And this impossible situation she's in.
Impossible situation, yeah. And so she's making these miniatures that, she's taking the horror of her life as we see it happening in real time, so to speak, and it's immediately becoming a scene in her artwork. And I thought that was, I think he could go a long way with that as a leitmotif in future films.
Yeah, I wonder what that says about Ari as a director, if he's taking anything from his life and putting it into literal scenes.
Yeah, I've got a lot of sort of nasty notes about how did you grow up, Ari, and what's your relationship with your mom like, and was she hovering on the ceiling, did it feel like a little bit, or was she, did your father sit there silently while she was berating you, which I think was one of the most horrifying scenes in the movie, was the father sits there while she's going after her son. His
passivity as he sits and...
Yeah, he just sits there silently and lets it happen, and to me that's real horror. I mean, that was,
Because he, in interviews, because I've been watching like a ton of Ari Aster interviews, and a bunch of behind the scenes, and Ari Aster talked about like he sort of, as he was making it, he was focused so much on making the family drama stuff super, super intense.
Yeah, she tore the head off.
Sophie has just eaten a part of the stuffed animal.
Yeah.
Sophie.
Well, she did watch the film with us.
She's trying to be close to you, Dad.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do with this? She wants me to throw it.
Sophie, either say something or let Christopher continue.
Sophie, sit. Lay down.
We have the cutest dog in the world sitting with us.
Yeah. Being the cutest dog in the world.
That's what this movie needed, was a cute dog.
That's right. Well, there was a dog.
But he didn't
get much to do.
He didn't get a lot of screen time and does not have a happy fate.
Oh, does he not?
In the very last scene, as they're going to the house, he's like dead in like the far background.
I didn't even notice that.
Well, that's nice.
One more strike against Ari.
If you want to have a bad time, watch Ari Aster's movies. That's what I say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did a quote at some point. Oh gosh, I wish I could remember.
I also lost my train of thought. We were talking about production design.
Yeah. Processing grief through immediately into the act of art.
Oh yeah, he forgot that he was making a horror movie because he was so focused on really making the family drama stuff as intense as possible, and that's where I was going with that, because you were talking about the dinner scene being like
it's one of the heights of the horror,
because it's kind of the emotional peak,
I would say so,
besides the attempted suicide with the book.
Right. Well, the dinner scene was like an Ingmar Bergman on acid, really bad acid, and combination of the mother saying things that you can't take back to her son, things that a parent should never say to a child, and an impotent, silent father letting it all happen. To me, that was more horrible than the floating in the corner of the ceiling. Do I want to watch that scene again? I don't, but I think that was more sort of great direction and acting and writing.
Part 5. Soundtrack.
No, you go.
So, I'd like to bring up a different subject here. The soundtrack.
Yeah.
Soundtrack was really effective. Christopher is our resident sound design and audio engineer and musical composer, and definitely gifted musician, and he's got ears that hears things that nobody else can hear. So, who was the guy that did the soundtrack?
Colin Stetson, former saxophone and French horn player, I think, for Arcade Fire.
Oh, really? Arcade Fire.
I did not know that.
A lot of the tone is sort of carried with these like little clarinet arpeggios that sound like strings. And those are like just to give a little bit of extra eeriness to stuff, and when things are getting extra creepy, there's this like weird sub bass rumble, and Ari Aster's intention was to make it sound like there was too much bass coming from a theater next door or something like that, and that the studios wanted him to cut all of that.
It sounded exactly like that. And I'd never noticed it before. But Dad, you were out of the room when Chris pointed it out to me. And I was like...
And then I paused it.
He paused it, and I was just like, wait, what sound? Because, for the record, Christopher hears things that literally nobody else in the entire world can hear. And he's just, like, very attuned to sounds in the universe. And so, it's not uncommon for me to be like, huh? What? But then
when you pause it, you could hear it.
Well...
Or you can hear the absence.
No, it wasn't until you played it, because you pointed it out, and then I listened for it, and I was like, holy crap.
Mm-hmm. It's like loud.
There's this, like, bassy sound throughout these certain scenes. So, yeah, that definitely, I'm sure subconsciously plays into the audience's...
Because it's a very anxious soundtrack. Mm-hmm. It's pretty quiet, but it's, like, very fast arpeggios, but very, like, far
off
away.
in the distance.
Yeah, so before I knew what kind of instrument it was, and I was just listening to it for the visceral impact that it had, it sounded like a tortured human voice to me, which fits, I'd say, pretty perfectly with the main theme of the film.
Yeah.
But in an eerie and a way that soundtrack like I've never heard before, and I've heard a lot of soundtracks.
Yeah.
It was quite unique, and I like it. That's one of those things that the more I know about how he did it, the better I can appreciate it.
Yeah.
You know, super effective.
Very, very effective score.
Does the score change through the film? Does it change towards the end?
Yeah, it gets super loud at the end.
It's super loud, yeah.
Yeah. All of the, like, creepy themes are all happening at once in the last 15 minutes.
Mm.
Or at the end, where the reborn cue, which is like a 10-minute cue.
It's some of the really scary supernatural stuff where she's floating up by the ceiling in a couple of scenes and all that, and people are catching on fire and all that other stuff. What's the sound? Is the soundtrack real intense right there?
I don't know. I feel like it like builds up and then it's like silence.
And then it's just sudden silence.
Yeah,
which
like
is also
very
scary.
sudden silences.
How about during the dinner scene? What was going on with the soundtrack?
I think there's no soundtrack.
There's no soundtrack.
So just the uncomfortable silence of a dysfunctional family.
Yeah. And there's like a couple of like noteworthy parts where there's no sound. Like where the mom's in the corner and then she like is crawling across the ceiling, there's no sound at all. Besides like Peter's breathing or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of I don't know if that's a style or a tool or what you would call it, but that's done a lot in Midsummer.
The audio editing in Midsummer is really strange.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love the use of silence in both Hereditary and Midsummer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in the like elder suicide scene, there's like sudden silence.
Part 6. Favorites.
Right. Yeah, and more so I'm thinking about like Danny, like we just hear her breathing a lot.
Yeah.
And just kind of, especially during especially during the when they're tripping, that scene that I tried to show you.
Yeah.
But then I was like, well, it's going to be too scary for you. And then lo and behold, I get another text from Christopher saying, well, I watched Midsummer. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
It's just surprising me left and right.
Yeah.
You're such a good role model for your brother.
As are you with your VHS.
Yeah, apparently. So, favorite scenes and 2 questions. Favorite scenes and what do you want to see Ari do after Midsummer? What's his next movie? So, favorite scene, Laura.
Favorite scene in Hereditary. I need to think about that for a second.
Okay. Any quick thoughts, Chris?
All of the scenes with Joan really have stuck with me very strongly. And the scenes where Annie is going through her mom's stuff.
Oh, yeah, that was really good.
And then the whole ending sequence really stuck with me. all of like the scary things stick with me visually because I don't watch a lot of horror movies, so it's all terrifying to me.
Yeah, right. You're sort of coming in at it from an outsider.
Yeah.
We have very different perspectives.
Yeah,
and yet
the
we have
ultimate
similar.
insider. Yeah, similar reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though I knew the scares, I knew all the scares before.
You put on your armor before you went in there.
Yeah.
And they still, when Charlie gets beheaded in the accident, that's like even knowing that was coming, because it just holds for like 2 minutes on. You don't really see it happen. You see a build up, and then it cuts back to Alex Wolf's face, and then it just holds for 2 minutes on his face, and you don't see any of the blood or anything. And then it goes to the next morning, and you're like, maybe they aren't going to show it, and then it hard cuts.
It's like, well, now we know Ari is into. He's very into body horror.
Yeah, and Toni Collette just wailing.
That's right. Yeah.
It's really heavy.
The wailing of Toni Collette in that scene reminds me of the bizarrely empathic group crying in Midsommar.
Yeah.
That same over-the-top, super vocal,
Well, Danny in the beginning of Midsommar has quite a cry in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is literally the opening.
Yeah, that was...
Yeah.
So between those two films, they both had incredible female leads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
The acting, the young girl in Midsommar, I thought was... I don't know who she is, but she is fantastic.
Her name is Florence Pugh.
Yeah,
Florence.
Thank you, Florence.
Thank you, Florence.
Really good.
Yeah, Toni Collette's performance. That's my other main takeaway.
She's amazing.
Toni Collette's performance needs to be lauded.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give her an Oscar, even though those bastards didn't give her one.
We give her an Oscar.
We give her
an Oscar.
Yeah.
So to your point, before Laura says what her favorite scenes are, we talked about the scene with Toni Collette going through her mother's stuff. As someone who's going through a lifetime of my artwork, no miniatures, and old journals and just books, and I'm going through boxes and boxes of stuff, and it is surprisingly, well, maybe not surprisingly, it's very difficult to go through that stuff at anything but a really slow processing kind of a rate, because it takes me back to certain moments that go, oh wow, I remember when I wrote that, and I remember this, and it's not easy to go through. It's quite challenging to go through, and that scene with Toni Collette, she has some serious challenges going through her mother's stuff. She's finding notes that are like, oh, Mom really was the twisted demon that I thought she was.
Right.
So anyway, just an autobiographical note.
Yeah, that's great.
So.
Yeah, I can't imagine going through that.
Yeah, so.
The note from her mom right at the beginning of like, it's gonna be okay, honey.
Yeah.
This will all be worth it.
Yeah.
Don't fear the sacrifices.
Yeah. Yeah, the sacrifices.
The sacrifices happen to literally be
Them.
all of them.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah. Well, worth it is such a subjective term.
Worth it is certainly a subjective
Yeah.
term.
So, Miss Laura, our resident professional film critic, favorite scenes.
Favorite scenes. I would have to say I would agree with Christopher. Actually, I was trying to think of other ones, but the scenes with Joan are my favorite, as well as the scenes in which Toni Collette is working on her artwork. In all stages of her grief.
Yeah.
From the beginning, which is just happy grief. It's like,
Happy
la-ti-da!
I'm just processing my stuff.
I'm just
I don't know how
processing
happy that grief was, but in comparison to
start-
later,
Oh, yeah.
it was by contrast.
We're starting down here, but by contrast, it's the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Absolutely, the top of the mountain. So, that's what I...
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the opening shot, like I said, going panning to the interior. I don't know if there's a better shot in the film. There's it says everything. It gives it the theme of the film. The composition, the set design. There was a lot of stuff in the backgrounds of this film that added to the
Or like the set design and stuff.
set design. The mise en scène was really detailed, and I'm sure there was creepy stuff hanging on the walls all over the place. I love that there's writings on the wall. You know, a little detail like that. That's so much better than floating, self-decapitating, mothers. It just, to me, that's scarier and better. And it's like the movie The Haunting, where, holding hands and the beds are separated. That was the most terrifying thing. And the fact that she puts that writing into one of her little miniatures.
Yeah.
Like
her own attention to detail.
Her own attention to detail. So, in a sense, Toni Collette's character is like Ari. She's like the surrogate for the director.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, like I said before, or as I was alluding to before, about her artwork being so similar to the process of making a film. I've never made a film.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
She's depicting scenes throughout her life, and she's processing them. And if one were to make an autobiographical film,
Sophie,
that's quite similar. She's out of control. I can't get her
to chill.
To chill. No,
Sophie, you have no chill.
When she doesn't have the full attention, she's
I am paying attention.
Sophie, what was your favorite scene? Oh, when that dog character chewed the squirrel and the head fell off, and then they performed that ritual with it. Yeah, that was a good scene.
Best.
That was a good scene. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the obsessed artist stuff. That's really good.
And her devotion to craftsmanship echoes the actual film itself, which is obviously devoted to craftsmanship. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I should look at it like if I had a student that did some art in a class that I was teaching, I would find something positive to say about it.
Yeah.
I can always find something positive to say. So, what did I like about it?
Chris, we need to sign into Amazon Prime,
Okay.
but I think it can be done by entering a code or something. I'm sure the code is Hill Hyman.
Part 7. Staying Power.
That's a perfect jumping off point to what you got. What do you two think the staying power of this film will be? And then after that, what do you think Ari Aster is going to do next? So I'll start with you, Laura. In like film history.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah. What's coming to mind is just this season in horror, but I'm trying to focus on Ari himself and like what he is providing, because the season of horror, I'm thinking of The Witch.
Of A24's
I'm thinking about
Reign.
Yes, and I guess I haven't thought about it. I know we touched on the fact that we were going to talk about this.
Yeah, but if you don't, yeah.
The staying power. Why don't you go first, Dad?
Well, I think what's going to be remembered from this film is Toni Collette's performance. Mm-hmm. I think will be. I think it will look really strong and powerful years hence. I think that some of the shots in the first half of the movie will be remembered for their brilliance. I think as a whole, I don't think it's going to be remembered as well as the movie he's going to make after Midsummer. I think it's brilliant. I think it's worth watching, but I think it's not as strong in its totality as what I would think of as classic films. Mm-hmm. The Haunting from 1960 or whatever that was, that's still scary. That's still, I think the kind of stuff that lasts is stuff that is not as obvious and not as overt as some of the stuff in this film. The more subtle things, I think, last longer.
In interviews, Ari Aster's talked a little bit about of why he made it as bleak as he did, and he's gone into specifics, and it's more about him having a negative reaction to most family melodramas, always, in his perception, bringing the family ultimately close together by the end of the movie. And his feeling was sometimes tragedy doesn't bring families close together, and that sometimes families fall apart. And he wanted to make a movie that explored that aspect of tragedy.
Sure.
And there's implications in some of the interviews, because a lot of interviews right after this film came out as a debut, a lot of the interviews are asking, like, Ari, are you okay? Like, how's your mom?
Yeah, I got a lot of questions about Ari's mom.
But whether or not that's successful is obviously up for debate. Of like, is that just because something's missing in film doesn't mean that it has to happen. In like the oeuvre, I guess, I don't know. To your point, it doesn't have to happen, even though it's missing. That a film like this was missing from the tapestry, it doesn't mean that it should have been made.
Yeah. No, it's not that it shouldn't have been made, but it was...
shouldn't have been so bleak.
Something's just, I'm a painter, so if I do a painting that's just dark, and then I add more dark to it, and then I add a couple blood stains and more dark to it, I hate to be so opinionated, but so what?
Yeah.
It's
that.
really so what? And it's not to say that they all have to go to the seashore at the end, and Toni Collette winds up taking antidepressants, and they're all fine. And, but...
Or they kill Joan.
Or they kill Joan, or something uplifting like that, But it needs some other color in it, and it didn't have it. So it was a descent into, the inevitability of horror, and, where we are at in this country. I think that's a reflection of some of the political realities of our time, but I want more than that.
Yeah.
So that's just me. When I was...
Yeah, I totally understand that, and I think that this movie functions on its own terms. For me, it works.
So was there anything missing for you?
I think that the story makes sense for what it's trying to say, and I'm not saying that this is something that you would disagree with, but I think that ultimately it does work. And that I wasn't left at the end of the film saying, so what? I was left at the end of the film going,
And then you did that in
Yeah.
Midsummer.
Yeah. That's a super interesting motif, the Midsummer,
Yeah.
of like, it's a slow exhale, a rapid inhalation, and then nothing.
Yeah.
So it's just tension. But yeah, I think that it functions, even though... the sort of funny thing is that all of your criticisms are resolved in a very similar movie, which was Ari Aster's next film, Midsummer.
I think it was a better film because of that, for me.
Yeah, for you. And for me, I like Hereditary pretty significantly more than Midsummer.
Yeah.
And because I think that, not only did Hereditary hit closer to home, this is sort of a superficial aspect, but I like the audio better. I like the audio editing better.
I don't think that's superficial.
I found the audio in Midsummer to be kind of distracting, even though I know that you like the audio editing. It's very jarring in Midsummer, and it's very intentional. But there's noticeable ADR mistakes in Midsummer that bother me. Mm-hmm. But there are some ADR mistakes in this film. There's, in fact, an entire word wrong. In the hallway where Joan is talking to Annie, Toni Collette's character, she says your family all has to be in the same room with her mouth. But there's an ADR of saying your whole family has to be in the house. In the same house. and that was probably some sort of previous version of the script or something, or some scene that they had to cut or whatever. Even though they're all in the same room, so I'm like, why not just keep the original audio?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the film functions for me without feeling, even though it's so bleak, I still think it totally works for me. And I wasn't left frustrated beyond my frustrations with any horror movie. But it not having jump scares and it being a very effective film and how it touched me on a thematic level, I totally loved it.
And shocked.
And I was shocked.
Okay.
I'm shocked that you loved it.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm like,
Your shock is noted.
yeah.
And thank you, Chris.
I'm sorry. I'm just sitting here, like, listening to my brother say that he loved Hereditary. Like, what? Where
Is this
am
really
I?
happening?
What is
Yeah,
this?
it's a long way for me. I still don't. There are some Twilight Zone episodes that I still don't know if I'd be able to watch.
Yeah.
Like Nightmare at 30,000 feet.
It's so campy now. You have to watch it.
Or To Serve Man. It's you have. I mean, like there are certain thematic elements.
Not rejection.
With very deep betrayal.
Betrayal. That's the
Which
word.
Rosemary's Baby does, and To Serve Man does.
Yeah.
There's very intense betrayal in both
Yeah.
of those things.
Yeah.
In To Serve Man, it's super campy, but in Rosemary's Baby, it hurt so much watching that movie.
I'm so sorry about that.
This is not me giving you a bet. I'm not giving you crap about
For
it.
the record, I basically made my brother watch this movie with me.
We've all made mistakes in either recommending or inadvertently leaving videotapes lying around that were too scary for a child to see.
If it makes you feel better, it's not the most disturbing AV experience that I've had, which probably goes to Graveyard of the Fireflies.
I remember.
Yeah.
Because
me
I
too.
rented it because it said Studio Ghibli on it, and I was
Yeah.
like
Of
9.
course. Of course.
And I was like, yeah, Studio Ghibli, they make all those happy kids movies, and it's their one rated R movie, and it is very R, and it is so sad.
I'll never watch it.
It is that is a film that I could not recommend less.
Well, your reaction to that film reminds me of my reaction to this film.
Yeah,
Was
is
the
that
bleakness of
yeah
it.
that film is unrelentingly bleak.
Yeah.
Graveyard of the Fireflies, in I think a very unredeeming way, which is, but that had more to do with my age and headspace. Like if I saw it for the first time now,
Right. Well, I'm just looking at my reaction to this film, and part of what pisses me off about I'm pretending Ari's my art student, my gifted student, is that it's a story about a family. I have a family. My family is the most important thing in the world to me, so it's a subject that's sensitive to me, and I want there to be more than just watching a family being unrelentingly going through this without any other note to contrast. Anyway, I've spoken enough.
A question was asked at one point, and I don't remember
Well,
what it was.
what's your favorite thing about
the
it?
staying power of the film.
Staying power of the film, and what's the next film after Midsummer for Ari?
The staying power of the film, I think you guys covered that pretty well. It's the thing that comes to mind for me is really very simple, and that he is elevating the genre to be more than just one note, in my opinion. And I recognize that sounds counterintuitive because it is one kind of emotional
It
note.
is one crescendo, but there's many notes.
There's many notes, and it is all bleak. I will give it that, but it elevates the genre because of the craftsmanship that goes into Ari's films, the amount of time and work, and it really shows. And so I
Very
feel,
specific.
and it's very specific, and as an audience, I think he expects his audience to be smart.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't think of his audience as being these dumb little whatever, jump scare here, jump scare there.
Yeah, this is no Blumhouse
No.
picture. Not to just on Blumhouse, like
No, they've got
they're
some
doing
good
their
stuff.
own thing.
They're doing their thing, and they do it well.
Yeah.
But I think, to answer the question, he's elevating the genre with his technique and writing and direction.
Mm-hmm.
And what do I think he will do next? What would I like to see him do next? I do not know if he's working on any projects right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I am really just hoping that he sticks with the horror genre
Mm-hmm.
in his quintessential way of bringing in family drama or comedy
Or breakup movies.
Breakup movies, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some comedy from Mr. Ari.
Well,
I think he wants to do some
his
comedy.
short films are more comedic.
Very satirical.
Yeah. I would love to see him do something more like Munchausen. Yeah, it would be. I think it would be really. His voice is his kishiness and his melodrama aspects and how he grounds it. He was talking about Something's Wrong with the Johnsons, where he was talking about he wanted when he was choosing to do the tone of the short film. He was like, I wanted to make it very tongue-in-cheek, but pull just enough and hang on shots just long enough to confuse the audience enough that they couldn't tell, that to confound and make things more ambiguous. Because he didn't want it to make a straight satire. Whereas I think Munchausen is very obviously comedic satire. If you changed or you removed a few elements, you could have had it on Adult Swim. And put it under AB Video Productions, which are the people who made Something Lives in This House, or The Thing That Lives in This House, and Too Many Cooks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it fits more in that tone, and I would love to see something more in that tone, because Ari Aster brings a depth that AB Video Productions doesn't have. Those are very technical, and they have great tone, but there's nothing underneath it that gives it support, where Ari Aster's stuff, they seem to have a lot of depth to him. He really cares about his characters, and he cares about the human experience.
Yeah, very much so.
And it seems like he's putting himself into Annie.
Yeah.
In Hereditary.
I think that's a really good observation, and I think that's the key to what his next film could be. You know, I think there's a lot of, we're teasing him about it's, about his mom and stuff, but there's obviously a lot of autobiography going on here, or seemingly so.
Yeah.
I'd like to see him, bring in some other aspects of his own personality into it through the lens of the artist. And I think he's got a lot of originality. I haven't emphasized the things I like about him as much in this podcast, I suppose, but there are a lot of things. And I think part of my reaction is that what was good about it was so good that I wanted him to keep it up. So,
Yeah. Do you feel like he did that in Midsummer?
Much better. I think the story was, it had a lot of different colors to it, a lot of different notes to it. The movie Babadook, which I saw once some years ago, I recall that as being a horror film at a higher level than this because of the story, which was really scary. But it had the mother was a hero by the end of it, and I thought that was really original. Having this descend into the place it did was less original, but
I kind of view Danny in Midsummer as a hero a little bit.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Even in the scenes that were cut the film, like where she technically saves the boy
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has like these. She's a hero to that group.
Yeah.
She's the hero.
Ari said that it was supposed to be a wish fulfillment fantasy for unsatisfied partners, for dissatisfied partners. Of just like all of your boyfriend's asshole friends and your asshole boyfriend literally go up in flames, and you're accepted into a wholly loving community.
Wholly loving?
Holy, yeah.
Are they wholly loving?
There were some holes in their loving. I think.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's supposed to be horrible at the same time. It's a twisted wish fulfillment.
Yes.
They are a murderous tribe, and it's like they do terrible, terrible things. But it is her fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my favorite characters that Ari has created was the friend that brings the other friends to the midsummer event.
Yeah.
Because the guy was so likable and so,
Pele.
oh, we're just going to it's just a fun, it's a summer, it's just a fun festival. And he was so believable and so kind of friendly and avuncular. Yeah. It was like, and then you see him interacting with the people and they're all hugging each other. You think, well, he just buys their paradigm.
Yep.
And
they love him so much because he's bringing their sacrifices.
He's really got a way with people. He knows how to really pick them.
Well, he's like the definition of Machiavellian, but in like the kindest way.
Yeah.
Where he's just kind of like cunning and and sly about everything, and the way he treats Danny is like a breath of fresh air throughout the whole film.
Yeah, because he's the only one who
actually cares about her.
The early scene in that movie where nobody else is giving her empathy for this horrible tragedy, and he looks her right in the eye and goes, I want you to know I'm so sorry for what happened to you. Mm-hmm. And he does it with this great eye contact, and she's like, oh man.
She's like, I need to leave the room.
Finally somebody. And, Norman Bates, part of what made him great was that he was such a sweet, friendly guy with just this mother that if he could just get rid of her, but one-on-one when he's talking to Janet Leigh, you really like him. Mm-hmm. And Janet Leigh likes him. Mm-hmm. Of course, she likes him a little too much, and that became very threatening.
Mm-hmm.
But that was when
mom got in the way.
See, that's what I mean by a different note. Mm-hmm. Midsummer had, like that character, that was a different note.
Yeah.
Part 8. Foreshadowing.
So there's one thing about Hereditary that I wanted to talk about.
Yes.
Usually when we're going back home, one of the things that we talk about that we haven't talked about yet is about setup and payoff and tiny elements like foreshadowing stuff or tiny set design details. And I wanted to talk about the Pyman symbol as it's used throughout the film and how stuff is predicted, specifically with the knocking sound and all of that. Mm-hmm. So the Pyman symbol is seen throughout the whole movie, which is the swirly and then the three people. And that's on the necklaces, that's on the grandma and the mom. Mm-hmm. But she doesn't it's just a gift from her mom, and she was wearing it in because it's a gift from her mom, and her mom just died, so it makes sense to wear that to the funeral. But she doesn't know what it means. She just thinks it's jewelry. And it's on the electrical pole. Mm-hmm. So was it an accident? Ambiguous of like how controlling is this really? Mm-hmm. But all we know is that these cultists are basically acting under omniscience of Pyman, or some sort of higher level knowing from Pyman. And the Pyman symbol is used in right before horrible things happen. Mm-hmm. We see it. What other sort of like foreshadowing elements or tiny little elements do you guys remember about this film, or what did you think of the foreshadowing? Like with the clicking and the reuse of the clicking.
And the peanut allergy.
And the peanut allergy. Oh my god. I have like that whole... Charlie has a peanut allergy, and it's established in the first scene of the movie. And then later on, she's eating peanut M&Ms.
Yep.
And
popping them down like they're nothing.
yeah, and not having a reaction to them. So it's like the demon is activating the thing, is activating the allergy when it's relevant to his plan.
Now here's the brilliance of Ari Aster is you wouldn't notice that unless somebody told you or you were looking for it or you read it on a forum or whatever, and who knows how that
you heard
person...
it on a podcast.
If you heard it on a podcast, hello everybody.
Hello.
Hello. But Christopher had heard about it, so he pointed it out, and sure enough, in the corner, the thing that she is eating is peanut M&Ms. How crazy is that? That's amazing that Ari, he puts little details like that in his work, and I think that's just really exciting. It reminds me of like True Detective season 1.
Yes.
Oh, so good.
There was so much to decipher, much to read into. We should do a breakdown.
We should rewatch that and do a breakdown of that.
That was really worth. That would be worth
rewatching.
Doing. Yeah, that was a really rich tapestry with two really strong main characters from the point of the view of the investigators, the two cops, and their relationship. That was, heroes battling evil. One of the heroes being a very, ambiguous whether he was a hero or not, and the other, they were both, very flawed, but it was just brilliant. I can't think of any other foreshadowing other than ones we covered of the, the miniatures and the writing on the wall
and the sound that Chris described of the
Apparently that was bass clarinet, but it sounds like a synthesizer to me, or it was a bass clarinet pitched down.
Could be anything, really.
I thought it was funny how they kept telling Charlie to take her shoes off when she came in, and then take her socks off. It's like, what else is she going to take off?
Right.
It was like...
she kept getting mud on her feet.
It was the impotent...
parenting.
Impotent parenting, attempting to exert any kind of control over the chaos represented in Take Your Shoes Off, Charlie. That was a little detail that I liked. I can't think of any other details. It doesn't seem like it's... there's a lot there, unless I'm missing it.
There's a lot there. I think that we've covered most of... We've covered the important ones already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Except for the lens glare.
Yeah, the sort of... The Pyman light flashes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very subtle special effects.
Yeah, I really liked it. I could totally see why someone like you or any other film-loving person would dislike this film. Or just any reasonable person, to be quite honest. But I just happen to love it. And I love Ari's perspective, which is really kind of funny because his perspective is probably a bit twisted, yeah.
Well, it's like a band puts out a first album, and it's got some really good songs on it, but it's got a few that
it's
they
definitely
just haven't
lacking.
developed enough.
The film does have areas where it's lacking. I will not dispute that for sure.
And it's not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
That's his next movie.
That's his next movie.
I hope he doesn't make a movie like Antichrist.
Oh my gosh.
See, that's another, a bleak fest.
Yeah.
David Lynch makes movies that can be very, just dark, but they're kind of redeemed by the fact that they're so, it's such a fantasy.
Yeah, like Wild at Heart.
Yeah, like Wild at Heart, which I recommend that Laura never sees in any of the years between 1990 and 1999. There's that surrealism to it. There's a playfulness. There's an inventiveness. It's just over the top, unexpected things. Twin Peaks, the little boy with the creamed corn in his hands, and
Twin Peaks is the best.
there was a sense of humor about a lot of
Yeah,
this.
there's humor. humorousness and there's the dream logic. It feels like somebody not necessarily having fun filming it, but like they were following the essence. They were like following where the script wanted to go.
Following where it wanted to go.
Yeah.
The dinner sequence in Eraserhead is every guy's nightmare of meeting his parents and having dinner with them, and then the chicken starts walking across the table. You go, oh, that's horrifying and funny at the same time.
The dad is like totally out of touch. The mom comes onto him out of nowhere, and it's like, oh.
From Eraserhead?
Yeah.
I actually, when you said that about the chicken, it reminded me of you and Mom describing the scary movies that you would watch. And that was one of the scenes. So I think I was just destined. It's in my...
Destined to watch lots of horror movies.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I don't believe that Hereditary is everything.
Mm-hmm. I got that. That was very tongue-in-cheek.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember being in Sunday school at Temple Jeremiah. I was probably 12, and some guy was sitting next to you said, have you ever seen Psycho? And I said, no. He goes, oh man, I watched it last night. I was up in my parents' attic. They were out to dinner, and I watched it by myself. And he told me the whole plot of the whole movie. Mm-hmm. And I sat there with my mouth hanging open and went, oh my God, I've got to see this. I've got to see this. I just couldn't believe what he was telling me.
Aww.
And that description of that movie is as vivid in my memory
as the film itself.
As the actual film itself.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those descriptions can be very powerful. I remember even earlier, Auntie and me and some friend from the neighborhood on 97th Street sitting on the bed. I remember where we were, and Auntie was telling us the plot to a Twilight Zone episode about an elevator that went up to the 13th floor of a building, and the doors opened, and there was all these mannequins there.
Right, yeah.
And the person's walking amongst the mannequins, and then the heads of the mannequins starts turning. Well, I was about 9, and that was a story. Mm-hmm. That was, you know, and horror movies tap into the kind of the fun of being scared and when they're at their best.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, you know, I think we all have different definitions of what fun is.
One thing that I remember somebody telling me, probably you, telling me about Being John Malkovich. And just describing that movie to somebody, it sounds like you took crazy pills.
I've never seen it.
It is very good. If you like Charlie Kaufman's other stuff,
I do.
Then you would. I think it's so unbelievably good.
I have to watch it.
Highly inventive.
It's like all of Charlie Kaufman's stuff. It's like so different than anything else.
Yeah, there's nobody like him.
Being John Malkovich, though, is a film that I don't like the ending of. I love everything else about the movie.
Don't spoil it.
I'm not going to spoil it. It's not like a bad ending. Like it's set up and it's paid off, but I wish they did it differently.
Part 9. Hereditary.
Before our closing thoughts, there's another note that you brought up while we were going over stuff that I wanted to touch on. And if you guys have any other sort of last notes, and then we're going to talk about would you recommend this movie?
Okay. I'm fading faster than you, and I still have to clean up, so just keep that in mind.
Okay. One thing that you brought up, Dad, that I want you to expand on is Annie rejects the mother's illnesses and beliefs, and the idea of hereditariness in the family line.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's one of the... It might be the main theme of it is, you know, what does a character do when they're aware of this bad strain running through the family, and
very bad strain.
This very, very bad strain, and not even quite aware of how bad the strain is. Her speech at her mother's funeral, I think, was one of the best scenes in the movie, because it subtly pointed to this very strange person that was lying in state in the coffin there, and then the bizarre behavior of some of the parishioners, and so Annie knew there was something, you know, as she said, was very private and very, you know, what were some of the other adjectives she used? Her mother was very...
She had private rituals and private friendships and private time, and she didn't feel guilty. No, she was guiltless in her life, and she
wouldn't be. She didn't want to hear the truth about herself or something.
No, you couldn't. She was always right.
She was always right. You couldn't bring anything to her.
Yeah.
That she would admit to.
And she was also suspicious of people.
Yeah, and if you said any of this to her, she would tell you to back off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's like a lot about like she feels of her estrangement from her mom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's the essence of Annie as the artist and Annie as the victim on a level that's deeper than she even knows, and that's the tragedy of it, is that even at some point she tries to kill herself to spare her, so she tries to burn her whole family to spare them from an even worse fate. Mm-hmm. You know, that was her protective instinct.
Yeah, in her sleepwalking.
In her sleepwalking. So that was her trying to correct the inevitability of her...
Yeah.
You know, and it's a theme of somebody says, you know, well, there's Parkinson's in my family, or there's this in my family, or there's this kind of, you know, it's a very real fear. And I think what makes horror movies effective is when they tap into real fears. So, on some level, Annie knows that, kind of a suppressed level, she knows that her life is not her own. Mm-hmm. And she's the victim of a
sacrifice that was not hers to make.
A sacrifice that was not hers to make, that was thrust upon her. She lives in a kind of a denial about that, but she pours it into her art, like artists do, from an unconscious place, from their own unconscious, the deepest parts of their being, which was, she's trying to work that out. She's trying to find a better way. She's trying to save her family. Mm-hmm. In many ways.
Yeah, and like it would have been better, huge air quotes, if she actually did burn Peter.
Yeah, well, that's and what could be more horrifying than that?
Right.
What
it would have been a better. She would have been able
right.
to at least thwart Pyman's plans.
Yeah, it's something about the inevitability of a person's own genetics. Their own, you know, on some level, you know, I mean, there's a lot of therapists and there's a lot of people in therapy, and that happens because they need it. And a lot of what people are trying to work out is a better way, despite how they were raised or what their genetic propensities are. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the reasons why I think that's at the heart of what's effective about it. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, and that's what I think you appreciated more when we watched scenes earlier today.
Yeah, it became more apparent, and especially Toni Collette's performance, you know, furiously working on her thing and that eyeglass, and she's trying to get, it's like she's trying to look into her own dysfunction. She's trying to find some way out of that, right. The prison that miniature house is.
That's the key for me.
Yeah.
That's the key to the whole movie is, and really in essence what the movie is about, why it's called Hereditary, and how it connects to, you know, when she's in the support group and she's sharing with the support group how much stuff is in her family.
Mm.
The level of mental illness that
she did some good work in that group
has plagued her family.
Yeah.
And so yeah, her wearing that eyepiece thing and trying to decipher these things, trying to figure out, okay, how can I stop this? Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned kind of earlier to you guys, and I'll mention now, a friend of mine pointed this out, that the film is following her trying to decipher these things, And a typical trope in horror film is to follow that line. What ends up happening is that it doesn't go anywhere. Because at that time in the dinner scene, where they're having dinner, she's already played into the horror of her family.
Yeah.
That's her repeating the cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
And so she's really doomed from that point on.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I like the way you language that. I think she's trying to decipher. I think maybe the central image is Annie with that magnifying eyepiece, working with these little brushes,
Yeah.
trying to get the details right, going in to try to find a way out, and
Exactly.
and quite poignantly. So to me that's the image, is her with that eyepiece, and the word decipher is
Also
exactly
the
right.
name of my web series.
Deciphered.
All right, a shout out, Laura's web series,
Yep.
available on
Film Inquiry's YouTube channel. 2 video essays, right?
Yep. One
Yeah.
on
The Witch.
The Witch and the other on Vertigo.
Yeah.
yes, well worth reading
Watching.
and watching and listening to
Thank
in all medias,
Thank you.
and translated
Yeah,
into
where's
all
the
languages.
transcript?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is that on the Film Inquiry website?
Not the transcript.
Yeah.
No.
I read the transcript. It was in French, but
Yes.
it was quite good,
Yeah.
especially when you use the word oeuvre.
Oeuvre.
Yeah. So, Chris, last thoughts.
I said everything that I wanted to say, basically.
Okay.
So, is everybody's main points covered?
Yes.
All right.
Did we say we
So
recommend
Laura,
it? You would recommend
yeah.
it?
So Laura, would you recommend Hereditary?
Yes, I would recommend this film to anybody who wants to have a really bad time. Yes. So my answer is yes.
Michael, would you recommend Hereditary?
I would recommend this to real horror film fans as a really good first film attempt. Very flawed, but with moments of brilliance.
But you prefer Midsummer?
Prefer Midsummer, and I really think this guy is going to have a great career.
I would recommend Hereditary very strongly to anybody who's a horror movie fan. I think that it not really having any jump scares, even though there's a lot of very terrifying imagery, should be a big sell to a lot of people who just don't like the startle, not scary films. And if you like family drama, I think that this is really, really great movie, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot and has really stuck with me more than most films I've seen in the past few years, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's great, and I would recommend it.
Cool. So for our next episode, we'll talk about what film we're going to discuss,
Yeah.
and stay tuned.
Yeah, we could
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned.
That's our catchphrase.
Yeah.
Goodbye.